Excuse me for one moment, I need to set the mood. Ah, finally. Music. The Max Payne series has been dormant for around 12 years now, which is kinda surprising considering how influential these games have been for third-person shooters. Starring titular character Max Payne, the original depressed violent man, and a very long line of depressed violent men, the series follows Max's descent into the criminal underworld after the brutal murders of his wife and child, investigating a mysterious new designer drug known as Valkyrie. So with a premise like that, you'd probably think these games would be incredibly dark, and while they don't hold back in showing some awful stuff, Max Payne still maintains a great sense of humor.
I'm not gonna be anybody's fall guy.
Well, at least the first two games did anyway. Max Payne 3 kinda skipped the comedy part in favour of Max being even more depressed. See, I've been wanting to talk about this game for years now, but I've never really figured out how to tackle it. I mean, it is a brutal game that dives headfirst into the most depraved kinds of people imaginable.
I agree, You got me.
All while Max ingests his entire body weight in pills and alcohol, and obviously showing any of that on my channel may cause YouTube to terminate my existence. But before we get into Max Payne 3, I think it's probably a good idea to look at how exactly we ended up here in the first place. Developed by Finnish game company Remedy Entertainment, the original concept for Max Payne started in the late 90s when Remedy began work on a third-person action game similar to Tomb Raider, which at the time was super successful. Firstly, the game of course needed a story, so Remedy looked to the writer they previously hired for their debut game Death Rally, the writer in question being university student Sam Lake. Wow, I think I've seen that face before. Sam was put in charge of writing the story and screenplay for Max Payne, and his main goal was to tell a much deeper story within the context of an action game, something that hadn't really been done up until now.
Don't have time to play with myself.
You like men. Men.
He started off with this archetype of a hard-boiled New York cop, and from there developed a darkly complex crime noir story with elements of Norse mythology thrown in for good measure. Hey, look, it's Ragnarok from the funny Marvel movie. Gameplay-wise, game lead Petri Giovalito was a big fan of Hong Kong action movies and envisioned the gameplay for Max Payne to emulate the feeling of watching a John Woo movie, introducing the concept of bullet time into the game. It's also probably worth noting that Max Payne was well into development before The Matrix came out and popularised the whole slow-mo bullet time thing, with the game's initial release being 1999. So no, Max Payne didn't copy The Matrix. Unfortunately though, the game was heavily delayed as Remedy wanted to improve the game's graphics with more realistic features. Although, with that being said, why does Max's face look like this? If you couldn't already tell, Max Payne was modelled after Sam Lake himself, as he played the role during the graphic novel-inspired cutscenes and also gifted us with this fucking face. Overall, the process to create the first game took around 5 years, as Remedy clearly went through excruciating detail to get everything right, even going as far to travel to New York City just to get an idea of what the environment was truly like. Eventually though, in 2001, Max Payne released to widespread critical acclaim, and undeniably redefined the third-person shooter, being the perfect mix of good writing, fantastic gameplay, and the ability to still keep the game fun despite its grim subject matter. Pair all of that with an outstanding performance by the late James McCaffrey, and you have an award-winning game that still holds up 23 years later. I mean, you can even play it on your iPhone now. Clearly, Remedy's years of hard work and dedication paid off. The game was hugely successful, reportedly selling close to 3 million copies within its first year. But with all that success, it wouldn't be long before others wanted a piece of that Max Payne pie. Now, we all know who Rockstar is, the games company who, nowadays, is mostly known for making the cowboy game or the stealing cars game. However, back in the early 2000s, Rockstar was a more obscure company, initially established in 1998 as part of Take-Two Interactive, who from there would publish several of the early GTA games, as well as other titles like Midnight Club Racing and The Italian Job. Anyway, when it comes to Max Payne, Remedy outsourced the development of the console versions to Rockstar, and after seeing the game's huge success both critically and financially, Take-Two Interactive offered to outright buy the Max Payne brand. Remedy, after what I assume would be a long time thinking it through, eventually accepted Take-Two's offer, selling the rights for reportedly $10 million, as well as close to 1 million shares of stock valued at $24 million. So you know, I think they did alright. This offer also had one more guarantee, that being Remedy would be given double Max Payne's budget to create a sequel. So naturally, after everything was signed, Remedy got to work developing. Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, began development in early 2002 with around $8 million coming straight from Take-Two's bank account, and clearly Remedy had a plan to put that budget to good use. The general criticisms from the first game were quickly addressed, along with bullet time being completely revamped and Remedy bringing in a brand new physics engine to create even more realistic and cinematic action scenes. Ah yes, realism. Other than that, polygons were increased, actual actors were hired, and overall the game looked so much better graphically, allowing Max Payne himself to actually have different facial expressions rather than it just being Sam's face. Speaking of which, Max's face was replaced with professional actor Timothy Gibbs, while Sam Lake was again in charge of writing the game's plot, this time wanting to take the story in a different direction, focusing on making Max Payne 2 a film noir love story. Evidently, Rockstar gave Remedy full creative freedom to do whatever they wanted, with only a few requests, mainly to get the game finished on time. But other than that, the game was entirely down to Remedy, and many at the company seen it as a nice way to say goodbye to a series they had spent years working on. Eventually though, in October 2003, Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne was released, and much like the first game, it was showered with fantastic reviews. Critics absolutely adored Max Payne 2. The story this time round was more polished, and offered an even more complex look into the character of Max Payne. The game's atmosphere felt more immersive, and the dramatic love storyline Sam had weaved into the screenplay added another interesting layer to the plot. Perhaps more importantly though, the gameplay was still incredibly fun. Sure, the new physics engine wasn't completely realistic, but everyone could look past that in favour of the intense bullet time action sequences that got your heart racing. So after all of that critical success, after all of the hard work everybody at Remedy had put into making this sequel even better than the first game, and after using all of Take-Two's money, what was next for Max Payne? Nothing. See, despite the positive reviews, Max Payne 2 unfortunately sold pretty poorly, meaning both Rockstar and Take-Two weren't exactly happy, seeing the game as a massive disappointment and ultimately a huge waste of money. All of this pretty much resulted in the Max Payne series getting put on ice for the next 8 years, and during that time fans of the franchise thought they'd never see Max again. Well, at least in video game form, but I'd rather not relive that fucking Mark Wahlberg movie. I mean, to be fair, The Fall of Max Payne had a beautifully tragic ending, which realistically could have been a defensive way to end this series, as there wasn't really much more to be explored when it came to Max. Or so we thought. But first, this video is sponsored by War Thunder. Buckle up, soldier, it's time to take to the battlefield with over 2,500 types of vehicles, from tanks, planes, helicopters, and of course, boats. War Thunder offers some of the most intense, accurate, action-packed PvP gameplay ever put to a video game. And guess what? It's completely free. That's right, you won't need to save up to afford this vintage tank any longer. All you need to do is download War Thunder on your PC, PlayStation or Xbox, and it's all yours. But not only are these stunningly detailed 4K vehicles completely free, War Thunder also has the most realistic and comprehensive vehicle combat ever made, making you truly feel like you're on the front lines. Hit markers are a thing of the past, and also very historically inaccurate, but with War Thunder, you can use the X-ray damage view to see exactly how much destruction you're causing to these poor players. But on the plus side, at least their tanks looked absolutely beautiful with all these great customization options. You know, before you nuke them. I was born in Carlisle, but I was made in War Thunder, and you can be too. Just sign up using my link in the description and join over 17 million players in these intense battles. Plus, new and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will receive all these bonuses, like premium vehicles and exclusive decorations. So what are you waiting for, soldier? Join the world of War Thunder right now. It's now 2009 and Take-Two have a little announcement to make. After 5 years since Max Payne 2 came out, Rockstar would finally be making a third Max Payne game. Now upon breaking this news, the number one question posed to Rockstar was why are they choosing to make Max Payne 3 now? I mean, third-person shooters had evolved massively since the last game, so it felt like the time for a new Max Payne had kinda passed. But that was exactly the reason why it was the right time. Nobody was doing Max Payne's frantic gun battles anymore, and it felt like most developers didn't really understand how to effectively utilize bullet time, nor replicate the ambitious storytelling that Sam Lake brought to the prior games. Rockstar didn't just want to make a third game with little to no request for one, but now, several years later, Max Payne was sorely missed in the gaming landscape, and thus Rockstar decided it was time to see the return of the man himself. While he's on holiday in Brazil. See, at this point, practically every game was based in New York, including multiple of Rockstar's own titles.
Nico, it's Roman. Let's go bowling.
So when it came to Max Payne 3, they decided to put Max in a completely new environment within Sao Paulo, Brazil. This obviously was a big change and one that fans of the series really struggled to get behind. Like when the game was announced in 2009, Game Informer did an exclusive preview giving us more details on our first ever look at the game. What the fuck happened to his hair? Unfortunately, this preview enraged fans for a variety of reasons, mainly because it was such a huge departure from the past games and that Rockstar had decided to not recast James McCaffrey as Max Payne. The backlash clearly hit Rockstar hard because while the game was supposed to come out at the end of that year, Max Payne 3 went through multiple delays and had a very complicated development.
This is fine.
Originally, the game was going to be solely made by Rockstar Vancouver, the same guys who made Bully, but by mid-2010 the game had already been delayed and went through various rewrites, with the poor Canadian developers being forced to work 16-hour shifts just to hit an August 2010 completion date, which they obviously missed. The game was proving to be a massive undertaking for Rockstar Vancouver, so other studios were enlisted to try and help finish development. But hey, at the very least, during all this extra time, Rockstar came to their senses and cast James McCaffrey to once again voice Max. It wouldn't be until 2011 when Rockstar finally announced a release date for Max Payne 3, along with an admittedly great debut trailer, stating the game would be coming out in March 2012. So of course it was delayed till May. But this time it was for real. The game had been in development since 2007, and at this point it reportedly became one of Rockstar's most expensive games ever developed, costing over $100 million. Probably because of all those trips to Brazil. Max Payne 3, by all reports, was a massive hassle for Rockstar, featuring a bold marketing campaign that included a 3-part comic series and the dev team constantly trying to up the quality of the game. So would all that extra time and money be worth it when Max Payne 3 eventually launched on May 15th?
Here I was, about to execute this poor bastard like some dime store angel of death. And I realized they were correct. I wouldn't know right from wrong if one of them was helping the poor and the other was banging my sister.
Taking place 9 years after the events of the second game, Max Payne 3 picks up with Max now being employed as private security for the Bronco family. And as you'll learn over the course of this game, he isn't great at his job. Now Remedy did serve as consultants on the game, but the bulk of the writing came from Rockstar's Dan Houser, who wrote like every GTA game.
Give me a fucking coffee!
I just made a French pot of coffee. Does anybody want coffee?
And while he certainly brings a grizzled dark tone to an older Max, he sorely misses the dry wit and sarcasm that Sam Lake had brought to the series.
I'm Frankie the Bat Niagara.
Niagara, as in you cry a lot?
Gonna cry?
Instead, Dan focuses more on making Max a horrifically nihilistic character who spends the first half of the game getting drunk. Just not in the fun British way. Basically, Max is a depressed mess for a large portion of this game, being unable to cope with the death of his wife and child. But wait a minute. Doesn't that kinda conflict with his whole story in Max Payne 2? I mean, in that game, Max starts at rock bottom and by the end learns to accept his grief and move on with his life, only to yet again be at another low point here. Did Rockstar just forget Max Payne 2 even existed when they started making this game? This slight dependence on a good old drink is really what causes all this chaos in the first place, as Max is again half cut when Fabiana Bronco, someone he's meant to be protecting, is kidnapped. Although I'd argue this is a good thing, because it means we get to shoot stuff. Now I've played a fair amount of shooters in my time, but I honestly think Max Payne 3 has some of the most impactful and satisfying shooting mechanics I have ever experienced, which you know is kind of necessary given you'll be shooting through half the population of Brazil. See, unlike the previous games, enemies don't ragdoll into oblivion anymore. They instead react to every bullet hitting their body in a horrifyingly realistic manner, clutching at their wounds until they bleed out, or Max sends a bullet straight for their skull. This is all thanks to Rockstar implementing the Euphoria engine seen in GTA 4, an engine which aims to create dynamic and realistic physics, although admittedly, it doesn't always work as intended. Another thing that Rockstar changed up is that this game prioritizes accuracy rather than Max shooting everything in sight, which normally I'm not the biggest fan of because I can't aim for shit, but I can't deny how much it enhances the gameplay, especially when you enter bullet time, line up a shot, and the music hits at the exact right moment. Other than the cinematic gun battles, Max is old now. Seriously, he's gained weight, probably from all the binge drinking, and clearly isn't as young as he used to be, with this being integrated into the gameplay, as every leap into gunfire usually ends with Max colliding into something and then clumsily getting back to his feet, adding a real sense of risk and reward to the game, as you'll either end up looking really cool, or dead. There's also just such an insane level of detail to this game, down to each individual bullet being physically rendered and each environment feeling like a real lived-in place. Evidently, those multiple trips to Brazil during development paid off, because every level in Max Payne 3 has a genuine sense of authenticity to it, whether that be a neon-filled nightclub or the poverty-stricken favelas of Sao Paulo, where you can meet some lovely people like this guy.
You're in a cat house in the slum, pal, doing who knows what.
I'm a businessman, bro. And they were fully legal in this country. I think.
This is what it's like to be a part of the Champions Club.
The thing is though, regardless of how detailed these environments are, there's still very little stuff that actually incentivizes me to explore them, besides trying to find more painkillers. I mean, for each level, there's only two kinds of collectibles you can find. Either golden gun pieces, which allows you to unlock a, well, golden gun, or you can find little clues to add further context to the story, neither of which are honestly that compelling. However, despite the fairly useless clues and how restrictively linear this game can be, I can completely look past it for moments like the airport shootout, a segment that has stuck with me ever since I played the game in 2012, mainly for one big reason. The music in the game was composed by LA noise rock band Health, who after this went on to work on other games like GTA 5, Ultra Kill, and of course Cyberpunk 2077. However, as far as I'm aware, Max Payne 3 was the first game the band had composed for, and they absolutely nailed it, creating a score that feels so uniquely different to the Max Payne series, yet somehow works so fucking well here. I mean seriously, I've been listening to this album for like 2 months while working on this video, and every song just hits. So I'm feeling a strong 10. Tears, the game's main theme, and the whole reason the airport shootout is so memorable, was nominated for Best Song at that year's Video Game Awards, along with the score being nominated too. However, honestly, to me, the best track in the entire game is one that complements the regretful tone of Max Payne, and also gives me the big sad, simply titled, Pain. Other than the fantastic score, something you've probably noticed by now is that the game is filled with visual distortions and glitch effects, looking like someone just went mental in Premiere Pro. Now upon first seeing this, you'd probably think all these effects are super annoying. I mean, before the game even launched, people were actually asking if you could turn the filters off. But when you actually sit down and play the game, you realise all this distortion helps to immerse you inside the world of Max Payne, a filthy, ugly, nausea-inducing place filled with all kinds of rotten people. Or maybe I'm just looking too much into it, and it's just meant to represent Max being constantly hungover. Either way, you can't really turn that off.
You're hungover and you need a cure quick.
You know what else you can't turn off? Crime, and this game has a fuck ton of it. As throughout the story, Max goes from being private security to uncovering citywide corruption, human trafficking, mass murder, and a slight bit of black market organ harvesting. Don't worry, I'm sure you won't be needing that.
Oh man, not my
Kidneys.
It's a dark game, to say the very least, and a common criticism I see is that there's very little levity here, but honestly, I'd have to disagree for moments like this.
Who do you think is targeting your family?
Haters.
Despite the grim nature of the story though, it's undeniably held together by James McCaffrey. The man completely embodies the role of Max Payne, and combined with his motion capture, gives arguably his best performance ever.
I decided that I was gonna die sober, not drunk.
I mean sure, the story has its issues, like how Max somehow didn't figure out he was being set up to be a fall guy. Oh no. But despite some narrative flaws, I was completely hooked on this game from McCaffrey's performance alone, even when the material he's got to work with definitely has the, Rockstar seal of approval. McCaffrey just brings Max Payne to life in a way that nobody else ever could. Like, he brings such a subtle mournfulness to the character, and honestly, he fully deserves an Oscar for making Rockstar's edgy dialogue somehow sound cool.
I didn't know what the hell I was gonna find up there, but I sensed it wasn't gonna be a stripper bursting out of a cake.
The story as a whole definitely has its flaws, but Max's turmoil is always at its forefront. We see him at his very lowest point, and as a result, you just want to see him get better, making scenes like Max finally going sober all the more impactful.
Hey, Vsauce! Massive
legend here.
The story of Max Payne 3 is violent, ugly, tragic, reflective, and I would even go as far to say kinda hopeful, as by the end of the game we see that Max has been able to move on with his life, or at the very least found some form of solace that isn't destroying his liver. I would also like to point out that beer is non-alcoholic. Trust me, I checked. The ending isn't anything we haven't seen before, especially within the Max Payne series, but I think it sticks with me a little more now, given the hindsight that this would unfortunately be the last time we'd ever see James McCaffrey play the role of Max Payne. Now, upon its release, Max Payne 3 was unsurprisingly slapped with fantastic reviews. I mean, just look at that Steam score, a thing of pure beauty. Seriously though, much like its predecessor, Max Payne 3 was a huge critical success, with both the story and gameplay receiving universal praise, with some going as far to call it a masterpiece of depravity and violence. Now, of course, the game wasn't without its controversies. Mainly Brazil wasn't too thrilled with its depiction of Sao Paulo, and some reviewers pointing out that the Portuguese lines sounded like they were put through Google Translate. Fans of the series also didn't really like the more depressive tone of the game, along with the noticeable difference in writing between Sam Lake and Dan Houser, which I will admit is a very required taste. But in saying that, it's hard to argue with that Metacritic score. Perhaps the most interesting review I found came from Eurogamer, who gave the game a respectable 7 out of 10, stating, "You can't escape the feeling that Rockstar just isn't as good at a pure third-person shooter as it is with the open worlds of GTA or Red Dead Redemption." A statement that Rockstar clearly took to heart, because that's all they fucking made since this game. Although there's a simple reason for that: GTA 5 made Rockstar a lot of money, whereas Max Payne 3 did not. Unfortunately, all those positive reviews couldn't translate into sales for Max Payne 3, as the game underperformed majorly for Rockstar, and Take-Two reported that the game's lower than expected sales contributed to a company-wide loss of $110 million. Which, let's just say isn't ideal. This major financial disaster obviously contributed to the Max Payne series being put back on ice, and is probably the main reason Rockstar hasn't made a non-open world game since. Although it isn't all bad, as it was recently announced that Remedy would be developing a remake of the first two games, which is something that everybody was happy about, especially considering it would be Remedy making it, and not the people responsible for the GTA remaster.
I'll catch up with you.
However, as far as Max Payne 3 goes, despite its poor sales figures, it is still regarded as one of the most well-rounded shooters ever made, and arguably the most creative game Rockstar has made in a very long time. It's far from perfect, and of course has its flaws, but it's an experience that stuck with me ever since I bought the game on release day. Or more accurately, when my mum bought the game, because I was like 13 years old. Honestly though, between McCaffrey's fantastic performance, the brutal gunplay, and a soundtrack I can't stop listening to, Max Payne 3 is a great game from start to finish, and by and large a poignant and satisfying send-off to one of the most iconic video game characters of the early 2000s, a very depressed, violent man.
You know I walk. You'll walk with a limp!
Well, your powerful people aren't gonna help you out of this one, buddy.
Also, one more thing. Remember, soldier, check out War Thunder for free on either PC or console, and sign up today using the link in the description to get all these spicy bonuses. Now, salute War Thunder for sponsoring the video.